The galaxy was wide and filled with countless races, but among them, the Zalari Empire stood as one of the strongest. Their cities shone like silver towers across the stars, their ships were sharp as blades, and their rulers were feared in every corner of space. At the center of this proud empire lived Princess Alira, a woman of great beauty and fierce pride. She had hair that shimmered like gold under the lights of her homeworld, and her eyes were bright as crystal lakes. Wherever she walked, the people bowed, and the council praised her name. Yet Alira was not only admired, she was also known for her stubborn will. Many times she spoke against the council, questioning their choices, and though her father was emperor, even he struggled to calm her sharp words. One day, during a grand meeting of the empire, envoys from allied races gathered in the Great Hall. They came to speak about peace, about trade, and about unity among the stars. But Alira, filled with anger, spoke in a way that shocked everyone. She insulted one envoy, calling his people weak and unworthy. Her voice echoed through the chamber, and silence fell. The insult spread quickly. Whispers ran through the empire, and the council's pride was hurt. The envoy returned to his world, his people offended, and the empire's peace was put in danger. The council gathered in secret and spoke of punishment. Alira had brought shame to her throne, and though she was princess, she was not above consequence. They decided she must be humbled, made an example for all, and so they chose a punishment cruel in her eyes. She would be married to a human. Humans were known in the galaxy, but to the Zalari they were seen as primitive. Their ships were weak, their world still young, their power small compared to the mighty empires. To be given to such a species and to live among them was for Alira a punishment worse than chains. The chosen man was Daniel, a farmer from Earth. His life was simple. He lived on green fields, worked with his hands, and cared for the soil of his world. He was not a warrior, nor a leader, nor a scholar. To the Zalari Council, this choice was perfect. What could wound Alira's pride more than being bound to a man of no power and no crown? When Daniel first heard the news, he was struck with disbelief. He had never left Earth. He had never dreamed of meeting beings from the stars, let alone marrying one. The idea felt like a strange tale told by travelers. But when the ships of the Zalari came to his world and landed near his home, he understood the truth. Soldiers in armor of silver stood before him and spoke of fate. Daniel tried to refuse. He was no prince, no man of greatness. Why would a princess be given to him? But the council's word was law, and his protests were nothing to them. They declared the union final, and soon Alira would arrive. On the day of her arrival, the skies of Earth burned with light as her ship descended. The people of Daniel's village stared with wide eyes, whispering in fear and wonder. They had never seen such a craft, never felt the power of alien engines shaking the ground. The doors opened, and Alira stepped out. She wore robes of white silk that shimmered in the sunlight, her crown set with gems that caught the eye of all who looked. She walked with her chin high, her face cold and distant. To her, this place was dirt, and the man she was given to was little more than a stranger beneath her notice. Daniel stood waiting at the edge of his farm. He wore simple clothes, his hands rough from work, his face marked by years under the sun. He bowed awkwardly, unsure of what to do in front of royalty. Alira's eyes swept over him with disdain, and her lips curved into a small frown. "So, this is my punishment," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "A farmer on a forgotten world." Daniel did not answer at first. He only met her gaze, steady and calm, though his heart beat fast inside his chest. At last he spoke. "I did not ask for this either," he said, "but if you are here, I will treat you with respect." The words surprised her. She expected fear or awe or desperate begging. Instead, she found a man who stood quietly, unshaken by her presence. She turned away, unwilling to admit even the smallest mark of respect for him. The soldiers of the council left quickly, eager to carry news of the Union back to the Empire. They gave no comfort, no gift, no guide. Their only command was that Alira would now live as Daniel's wife, bound by law. And then their ships rose back to the stars, leaving Earth quiet once more. Alira entered Daniel's home without a word. She looked around at the wooden walls, the rough floor, the simple tools. To her, it was like stepping into a cage of stone. She lifted her chin higher, as if to guard herself from the weight of humiliation. Daniel watched her silently. He knew her eyes carried pride, and her heart carried anger. But he also saw the loneliness hidden deep beneath it. Still, he did not speak of it. He only offered her food, though she refused. He showed her a room to rest, though she did not thank him. That night, as the stars shone above Earth, Alira sat by the window, staring into the sky. She thought of her palace, her throne, the halls of silver she had left behind. To be forced into this life was shame beyond words. Yet Daniel, in the next room, lay awake as well. He thought of the strange turn his life had taken. Yesterday, he was a farmer with no dream beyond his field. Today, he was bound to a princess of the stars. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he promised himself one thing. He would not break under the weight of this fate. The first days of Princess Alira's new life on Earth were filled with silence and tension. She walked through Daniel's small wooden house with her head raised high, her eyes cold, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Every detail of her new surroundings offended her pride. The floor creaked beneath her steps. The air smelled of soil and grass, and the food Daniel placed on the table seemed plain and tasteless compared to the feasts of the Zalari palace. Daniel noticed her every reaction. He was not blind to her disdain, yet he chose not to respond with anger. Instead, he kept his calm, moving about his tasks as if her insults and silence were no weight on his shoulders. He had lived all his life with patience, and now it became his only weapon in facing the proud princess. Each morning, Daniel rose with the sun to work the fields. He tilled the soil, watered the crops, and tended to the animals. Alira, at first, refused to step outside, preferring to sit near the window and stare at the horizon. She wore robes of fine fabric that did not fit the dust and wind of Earth. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were sharp. "Your world is simple," she told him one morning, her voice filled with scorn. "No light towers, no crystal, halls, no fleets in the sky, only dirt." Daniel paused in his work. He looked at her, standing there with her proud gaze. "It may be simple," he said slowly, "but it is my home, and it has given me all I need." Alira turned away without answering. She could not understand how a man could be content with so little. At meals, Daniel placed food before her, but she pushed it aside at first. Bread, fruits, roasted vegetables, none of it seemed fit for a princess. She claimed she could not eat such things, yet hunger, as always, is stronger than pride. By the third day, she tasted the bread, then the fruit. To her surprise, the flavor was not as poor as she imagined. She did not admit it aloud, but she ate more than she expected. Nights were no easier. The house was small, and though Daniel gave her the larger room, she still felt imprisoned. She missed the vast chambers of her palace, where her voice echoed against shining walls. Here there was only silence, broken by the sound of crickets outside and the soft wind moving through the grass. She lay awake, telling herself this was not her life, only a trial she must endure. Daniel, on the other hand, lived as he always had. He worked with steady hands, cared for his animals, and returned each evening with tired steps. But though his life seemed unchanged, Inside his heart, he carried a new weight. He wondered what kind of life it would be to share a roof with someone who despised him. Still, he reminded himself that he had not chosen this fate, and neither had she. Perhaps in time, they would learn to live side by side. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon and painted the sky with red and gold, Daniel returned from the fields to find Alira standing outside. She had finally left the house, though her robes dragged in the dust and her fine shoes sank in the soil. She looked at the setting sun with a frown. "Your world is quiet," she said when Daniel came near. "Too quiet. On my world, the skies are filled with ships, the air with the hum of machines. Here there is only silence." Daniel stood beside her, wiping his brow. "Silence is not always a curse," he replied. "Sometimes it gives peace." Alira glanced at him, studying his face. His words were simple, but there was strength in them, the kind of strength that did not come from power or crowns. For a brief moment, she felt her heart stir with something unfamiliar, but she quickly turned away, unwilling to let the thought remain. The days stretched on. Alira continued to resist the life before her, yet small changes began to show. She no longer refused food. She stepped outside more often, watching Daniel as he worked. Sometimes she asked him questions, though her tone was still sharp. "Why? Do you work with your hands when machines could do this for you?" she asked one afternoon as he dug into the soil. Daniel looked up at her. "Because I trust my own hands more than machines. When I plant a seed, I know I gave it life with my labor. When it grows, I know it is mine. That is a gift no machine can give." Alira did not answer, but his words stayed with her. She had grown up in a world where machines carried the weight of life. She had never thought of labor as something noble, though her pride remained. Alira began to see something she had not seen before. Daniel never raised his voice at her, never mocked her for her sharp words. He showed patience at every turn. He was not a man of greatness in the eyes of her people, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. Still, their bond was weak. Alira often sat alone, lost in thoughts of her home world. She missed the songs of her people, the light of the crystal towers, the taste of food prepared by the royal kitchens. At times, she felt anger burn inside her, blaming Daniel, blaming the council, blaming even herself. She told herself she would never accept this life. And yet something in the air of Earth began to soften her. The fields stretched wide and open. The sky was painted with colors she had never noticed before. The stars at night seemed brighter than those seen from her palace, perhaps because here she stood under them, not above them in ships of steel. Daniel noticed her quiet stares. He did not ask about them, but he wondered. Perhaps behind her sharp words and proud eyes, the princess was beginning to see more than punishment in this new life. The awkward union continued. They spoke little, shared little, and yet each day changed them in small ways. Alira's pride was tested and Daniel's patience was stretched, but both endured. Neither yet knew that this uneasy beginning was only the first step toward a bond that would shape not only their lives, but the fate of worlds. Night fell quietly over Daniel's farm. The sky above was filled with countless stars, and the soft wind moved across the fields. Daniel had just finished his work and was preparing to rest when he heard strange sounds outside. His animals cried in fear, and the sound of heavy steps broke the calm of the night. Daniel quickly stepped out of his house. In the distance, he saw figures moving toward the farm. They were not soldiers of the Empire, nor peaceful travelers. They were bandits, men from the outskirts of Earth who had heard of the alien princess and believed they could gain riches by capturing her. Alira appeared at the doorway, her eyes sharp as she looked at the approaching shadows. She crossed her arms, her voice calm but cold. So, even on this world, danger follows. Let us see how your simple life handles this. Daniel felt fear rise in his chest, but he did not back away. He had no great weapons, only a staff he used for his farm. Still, he held it firmly. "Stay inside," he told Alira. "I will handle this." Alira almost laughed at his words. To her, Daniel was only a farmer, and the men approaching were armed with blades and crude weapons. She expected him to hide or run, but instead he stepped forward to face them. The bandits came closer, their leader grinning. "So this is the house of the alien princess," he said. "Hand her over, farmer, and we will let you live." Daniel's grip tightened on his staff. His heart pounded, but his voice did not shake. "She is my wife," he said firmly. "If you want her, you will have to go through me." The bandits laughed. To them, Daniel looked weak, a man with nothing but courage. They moved forward, and the first swung a blade at him. Daniel stepped aside quickly, using his staff to strike the man's arm and knock the weapon away. His movements were not trained, but they were fast and full of determination. Another bandit attacked, and Daniel blocked with his staff, pushing the man back. His arms burned with effort, but he refused to fall. Alira, standing at the doorway, felt surprise in her chest. She had expected him to hide behind her, but he was fighting for her instead. The leader of the bandits grew angry and charged at Daniel with a heavy strike. Daniel stumbled under the force, falling to one knee. The staff shook in his hands and the blade was close to his chest. At that moment, Alira made her choice. She lifted her hands and energy sparked at her fingertips. With a sharp motion, she sent a wave of force toward the bandit, throwing him back several feet. The men gasped, fear flashing in their eyes. They had not expected the princess to fight. Daniel pushed himself back to his feet, gripping his staff tighter. Side by side, he and Alira faced the attackers. Daniel struck with all his strength, while Alira used bursts of energy to knock the bandits down. The fight was short, for the men soon realized they could not win against this unlikely pair. They fled into the darkness, leaving only silence behind. Breathing heavily, Daniel leaned on his staff, sweat dripping down his face. His arms ached, and his body felt weak, but his eyes burned with determination. Alira stood beside him, her robes glowing faintly from the energy she had used. For a long moment, she looked at him in silence. "You fought for me," she said, at last her voice softer than before. Daniel looked at her, his breath still heavy. "You are my wife," he answered simply. "I could not let them take you." The words struck her deeply. She had lived her whole life surrounded by guards, soldiers and servants who protected her because of duty or fear of the empire. But this man, a farmer with nothing to gain, had stood in front of danger without hesitation. That night, Alira sat at the table with him for the first time. He placed food before her, and though it was simple bread and vegetables, she ate without complaint. Daniel watched her quietly, and when their eyes met, she did not look away. For the first time since her arrival, the silence between them did not feel heavy. It felt like something new, something fragile and yet alive. In the days that followed, the memory of the fight lingered in Alira's mind. She walked outside more often, watching Daniel as he worked. His arms moved with strength as he carried water, lifted tools, and guided the animals. She thought of the moment when he stood before the bandits, his staff held high, and her heart stirred with something she could not name. Daniel noticed her presence but said nothing. He continued his work, though inside he wondered if she had begun to see him differently. He did not seek her gratitude, but he felt a quiet hope growing in his chest. One evening, as the sun set behind the fields, Alira approached him. She stood with her hands folded, her voice steady. "Why did you not hide? You could have left me to defend myself. You knew I had power." Daniel paused, then looked at her with calm eyes. Because it is not right to let someone stand alone when you can stand beside them. You are my wife. That is enough reason. Alira felt her chest tighten at his words. No soldier of her empire had ever spoken so simply, yet with such strength. She turned away quickly, unwilling to let him see the warmth rising in her eyes. That night, as she lay in her room, she thought of Daniel's courage. She thought of how he had faced danger with nothing but his will. For the first time, she felt her pride soften. Perhaps this man was not as weak as she once believed. Perhaps, in his quiet way, he carried a strength greater than she had ever known. The days after the bandit attack brought change to the farm. For the first time since her arrival, Alira no longer locked herself away in silence. She began to walk outside each morning, watching Daniel as he worked. Though she still carried her pride, there was a quiet curiosity in her eyes. At first, she only stood near, her arms crossed as she observed. She made small remarks, often sharp, about the roughness of his tools or the slowness of his methods. But Daniel only smiled faintly and kept working. Soon, however, Alira grew restless. Watching was not enough. She wanted to understand why he worked with such patience when machines could do the same tasks faster. One morning, she stepped forward. "Show me," she said. Daniel looked up from the soil, his brow lifted in surprise. "Show you what?" "How you grow your food," she answered. "I want to see how you do it with your hands instead of machines." Daniel hesitated. He had not expected such words from her, but he nodded. He placed a tool in her hand, guiding her on how to turn the soil. Alira's movements were clumsy at first. The tool felt heavy, and the earth resisted her strength. She frowned, frustrated by how difficult such a simple act could be. Daniel stood beside her, patient and calm. "It is not about strength," he explained. "It is about rhythm. The soil responds if you work with care, not force." Alira tried again, following his advice. Slowly, she found a steady movement, and the soil began to break apart more easily. Sweat formed on her brow, and her hands grew tired, but she did not stop. For the first time, she felt the weight of labor that built his life. When she finally paused, breathing heavily, Daniel offered her water. She drank in silence, then looked at him with a new expression. "Your way is slow," she said, "but it is not without meaning." "I see why you do it." Daniel gave a small smile. "It teaches patience. It reminds me that life grows from effort." That day marked a quiet shift. Alira began to join him in the fields more often. At first, she mocked her own mistakes, calling herself clumsy when tools slipped from her hands, but soon laughter followed her words. It was a sound Daniel had never heard from her before. He found himself smiling more in her presence, though he kept his heart steady. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire. Alira asked questions about Earth. She wanted to know its history, its people, its struggles. Daniel told her stories of old wars, of kingdoms that rose and fell, of humans who stood against stronger foes yet refused to surrender. "Your people are stubborn," Alira said one night, her eyes bright in the firelight. "You face forces greater than yourselves and still fight on. It is strange, admirable perhaps, but strange." Daniel chuckled softly. "We have little choice. We survive because we refuse to bow, even when the world tries to break us." His words echoed in her mind long after the fire died. She thought of her own people, the Zalari, who relied on power and fear to rule. She wondered if perhaps the humans' quiet strength was something greater than pride. In return, Alira began to share her own stories. She spoke of her empire, of the shining towers that reached into the skies, of the great halls filled with light. She told him of battles fought in the void, of victories that shaped the stars. Her voice carried both pride and sorrow, For though she missed her home, she no longer saw it with the same eyes. Daniel listened with interest. He did not interrupt or judge. He let her speak freely, and for the first time, she felt truly heard. 1. Evening, as the stars glittered above them, Alira asked him a question that had weighed on her heart. "When the bandits came, you stood in front of me. You knew you could die. Why did you not let me fight alone? I had power enough to stop them." Daniel looked at her with calm eyes. "Because I could not stand aside while you were in danger. You may have power, but I have duty. You are my wife. That is reason enough." The words struck her deeply. She lowered her gaze, unable to hide the warmth rising in her chest. For so long she had believed he saw her as a burden, yet his actions spoke otherwise. From that night onward, their silence grew softer. It was no longer the silence of strangers, but of companions who did not need to fill every moment with words. They worked together in the day, shared stories in the evening, and rested under the same roof without the heavy weight of disdain. Still, Alira carried fear in her heart. She knew the council would not remain silent forever. They had sent her, here to be humbled, not to find peace. If they learned she had begun to accept this life, they might act again. Yet she pushed the thought aside for now. For the first time since her punishment began, she felt something close to freedom. On Earth, away from the silver halls and sharp eyes of the council, she could laugh without fear. She could speak without being measured. One night, as she sat outside watching the stars, Daniel joined her. They looked up together, the sky endless above them. Alira spoke softly. "The stars seem brighter here. On my world, they are hidden by the light of our towers. Here they feel closer." Daniel nodded. "Perhaps that is because you are seeing them with new eyes." She turned to look at him, her gaze lingering longer than before. For the first time, she wondered if this simple man, with his rough hands and patient heart, might be more than fate's punishment. Perhaps he was the key to something she had never known, peace not born of power, but of trust. The days on the farm grew warmer, and life between Daniel and Alira began to settle into a rhythm. They worked side by side in the fields, shared food at the same table, and in the evenings told stories beneath the quiet glow of the stars. Though pride still lingered in Alira's heart, the cold distance that once marked her words had softened. She began to see Daniel not as a punishment, but as a man of steady strength. But far beyond Earth's skies, the Zalari Council was restless. Reports reached them that Alira had not broken under her punishment. Instead of living in shame, she had begun to adapt. Rumors whispered that the proud princess had even grown close to the human farmer. This was not what the council desired. They wanted her pride crushed, not reshaped into new strength. In their great chamber of silver stone, the council gathered. Voices rose in anger. "She was meant to suffer, not thrive," one counselor declared. "She mocks us by embracing her." "Life among humans," another added. The decision was swift. Envoys would be sent to Earth to remind Alira of her place. She was still bound to the Empire's will, and if she dared to defy them, they would not hesitate to act. The day came without warning. Daniel was working in the field when the sky darkened. Shadows fell across the land as a ship descended, its silver hull shining in the sunlight. Villagers nearby screamed and scattered, hiding in fear. Daniel dropped his tools and ran toward the house, his heart pounding. Alira was already outside, her eyes fixed on the descending ship. Her face showed no fear, only sharp defiance. She knew at once who had come. The ship landed heavily on the soil, and the ground shook beneath its weight. From within stepped 3 envoys of the Zalari, their robes marked with the crest of the council. They walked with cold authority, their eyes locking on Alira as if Daniel did not exist. "Princess," the first envoy said, his voice hard. "The Council demands your return. Your time among these humans was punishment, not freedom. You will come with us at once." Alira raised her chin. "No, I will not return." The envoys frowned, exchanging looks of surprise. They had expected resistance, but not such boldness. "You forget your place," the second envoy said sharply. "You are bound to the Empire. This world is beneath you. This man is beneath you. The Council does not wish to see you reduced to a common worker in the dirt." Alira's voice rang clear. "You sent me here to be humbled, and I was. But I was not broken. You wish to punish me with this union, yet I have found more truth in it than in all your empty halls. I will not return." Daniel stood beside her now, though his heart trembled. He had no power to face these envoys, yet he would not leave her side. "She belongs here," he said firmly. "This is her home now." The first envoy turned to him, with cold eyes. "You dare to speak in matters beyond your kind? Humans are weak. You are nothing but farmers and dreamers, clinging to a small world. Do not place yourself in the affairs of empires." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but he did not back down. "Maybe we are farmers, maybe we are simple, but that does not make us weak. I will not let you take her." The envoy stared at him, stunned that a human dared to speak with such courage. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then the third envoy spoke with scorn. "If you resist, you bring danger to your world. The Council has fleets enough to burn this planet to ash. Do not test us." Alira stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "If you harm this world, you will face me. I am still a princess of the Empire, whether you wish to claim me or not. I have made my choice. I stand with Daniel and with this world." Her words struck like fire. The envoys hesitated. They had not expected her loyalty to shift so far. The first envoy narrowed his eyes. "The Council will not be pleased. You defy them openly. If you continue on this path, you will no longer be seen as a daughter of the Empire, but as a traitor." Alira's voice did not falter. "So be it. I will not be their puppet. If they wish to call me traitor for choosing truth over pride, then let them." The envoys exchanged sharp whispers, their faces hard with frustration. At last, they turned and walked back toward their ship. "You will regret this," the second envoy warned. "The Council does not forgive rebellion." The ship lifted into the sky, rising higher until it vanished into the distance. The villagers slowly emerged from hiding, their faces pale with fear. They whispered of war, of fleets from the stars, of doom approaching their small world. Daniel placed a hand on Alira's shoulder. "You know they will return," he said quietly. "Yes," Alira answered, "and when they do, they will not find me alone. They will find me standing with the humans they once mocked." That night, as the stars stretched wide above them, Daniel and Alira sat together by the fire. The air was heavy with the weight of what had happened, but neither spoke of fear. Instead, Daniel looked into the flames and said, "If they bring war here, it will not be easy. We have little compared to them." Alira turned her gaze toward him. "Power is not always victory. I once believed my people's strength made them unshakable, but I see now that true strength lies in the heart. Your people may not have fleets, but you have courage. Perhaps that will be enough." Her words brought a quiet comfort to Daniel. Though the threat of the Empire loomed over them, he felt something stronger rising between them. For the first time, they stood not as strangers forced into union, but as partners who had chosen to face the storm together. The threat of the Council was clear, yet neither would bow. A princess of the stars and a farmer of earth now stood united, ready to face whatever trials the Empire would send. The sky above Earth darkened with the shadow of a vast fleet. Zalari ships, sharper and larger than any human craft, hovered above the farm where Daniel and Alira stood together. Their silver hulls reflected the sunlight, creating a blinding glare that stretched across the fields. The humans in the nearby village froze in fear, unsure of what force had arrived above them. Alira faced the ships without flinching. Her hair caught the light of the sun, and her eyes burned with determination. Daniel stood at her side, gripping a simple staff he had used to fend off bandits before. Though he had no weapons that could match the fleet above, he refused to retreat. A loudspeaker rang out from the lead ship. The voice of the Zalari commander echoed across the fields. "Princess Alira, return to your empire at once. Your defiance has gone too far. Accept your place, or your world will suffer the consequences." Alira lifted her head. "I will not return," she called. "This world is my home. Daniel is my husband. I will not leave." The commander's voice grew cold. "You still do not understand. Humans are weak, and your defiance endangers you all. You will regret this choice." Daniel stepped forward, his voice strong and steady. "I am a human, yes. I may be weak in your eyes, but I will not bow to fear. We will not surrender, and she will not go alone." The words echoed across the fields, carrying a courage that surprised even the Zalari commanders. The human villagers watched silently, unsure what to do, but Daniel's stance inspired them. They began to gather tools and weapons, not for offense, but to show they were ready to defend their homes. Alira sensed the fear in the Zalari fleet, but also felt a shift in their perception. She raised her hands, her energy shimmering faintly around her, signaling her readiness to protect Earth. "I am still a princess," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "I have the power of my people, but I choose to stand here, with Daniel, with these humans. You will not take them from me." A moment of silence followed. Then one of the Zalari envoys spoke, stepping forward on the deck of the lead ship. "Do you truly believe these humans can stand against us? They are nothing compared to the might of the Empire." Alira turned her gaze to Daniel. "Do not underestimate them. You will see that strength is not only measured in ships or weapons. It comes from courage, loyalty, and unity." Daniel nodded. He looked at the villagers, at Alira, and felt a surge of resolve. "We will show them," he said. "We will show them that the human heart can be stronger than any fleet." The Zalari ships moved closer, scanning the farm with beams of light. Alira's energy pulsed around her as she prepared for defense, but she did not act alone. Daniel moved among the villagers, encouraging them to stay calm and organize themselves. They brought tools, ropes, and barriers to slow any landing forces. Though they were simple humans with no weapons of war, their spirit was strong. The lead ship opened a communications channel again. "Princess Alira, surrender now. Your human allies are no match for us. Do not force a battle that will destroy this world." Alira raised her voice, steady and unafraid. "If you come here to destroy, you will face not just me, but the will of these people. We will not surrender. This is our home, and we will protect it together." Daniel stepped closer to her, standing tall despite his fear. "We are ready," he said. "If you want war, you will find that our courage is as real as any weapon." The commanders on the lead ship hesitated. They had expected compliance, or at least fear, but the humans did not falter. The princess, whom they intended to punish, now stood beside a human with loyalty and strength that challenged their expectations. Alira's energy flared as she levitated slightly above the ground, showing the Zalari fleet that she was prepared to defend her choice. Daniel's calm presence beside her made the stance stronger. The villagers, inspired by his courage, raised tools and shouted, showing they would not abandon their home. The Zalari commanders exchanged worried glances. They had the power to destroy, but the human determination combined with the princesses, defiance, introduced uncertainty. To their surprise, some of the envoys felt hesitation. They had never seen their empire's punishment met with such unity and courage. Alira stepped forward, her voice carrying across the fields. You may have ships, but we have will. You may have strength, but we have hearts that do not bend to fear. Leave now, or face the consequences of your choice. The lead commander's jaw tightened. You think words can stop a fleet? He asked. Alira shook her head. Not words alone, but the courage behind them. We do not fight for empire or power, but for life, for love, for home. That strength is greater than any weapon you bring. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. I will stand with you, he said simply. We will face whatever comes, together. The Zalari ships hovered silently, scanning the humans and the princess. For a long moment, the silence was heavy. Then the lead commander spoke into the channel, his tone calmer than before. Your defiance is unexpected. We will report back to the council before taking action. Prepare yourselves, princess. With that, the fleet slowly lifted and returned toward the stars, leaving Earth's farm untouched for now. The villagers released their breath, relief washing over them. Daniel and Alira stood together, side by side, hearts still pounding but stronger than ever. Alira turned to Daniel, her pride softened, her eyes bright. You were right, she said quietly. Courage and loyalty are stronger than fleets. I see it now, not just in you, but in all of them. Daniel smiled faintly. You saw it yourself, and now we know we can face anything as long as we stand together. The stars above sparkled, peaceful for the moment. But both knew the Zalari Council would not forget. Their defiance had been noticed, and the Empire would soon decide whether punishment or war would follow. Yet in that quiet moment, on a simple farm beneath a wide sky, a princess and a farmer stood united, ready to face the trials ahead. The bond between them had grown stronger, not by law or command, but by shared courage, loyalty, and the choice to defend what they loved. The days after the Zalari fleet's retreat were calm but full of preparation. Daniel and Alira knew the council's return could come at any moment. The villagers helped fortify the farm with barriers, tools, and clever traps. Though they had no advanced weapons, their determination gave them strength. Alira walked through the fields beside Daniel, her robes now practical for labor. The princess who once sneered at the dirt now felt the earth beneath her feet with respect. Each seed planted, each tool held, brought her closer to understanding the life Daniel had built. You are patient, she said one morning, watching him water the crops. Not just with the work, but with me. Daniel smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. Patience is necessary when something is worth protecting. Alira glanced at him, a warmth in her heart she had not admitted even to herself. She no longer felt punishment in her marriage, but a partnership that challenged her, strengthened her, and gave her a quiet joy she had never known. The village. Children often followed her, curious about the princess who now worked alongside them. At first, she had been stiff, unsure how to interact. But soon, she laughed, taught them how to plant seeds, and shared stories of distant worlds, making the children's eyes widen with wonder. She saw the beauty in their simplicity, the joy in their small achievements, and felt her own heart lighten. One evening, as the sun set, Daniel and Alira stood outside the farmhouse, watching the colors of the sky blend with the horizon. Do you ever miss your home? Daniel asked softly. Alira nodded. Sometimes. I miss the towers, the songs, the stars from my world. But I do not miss the loneliness. I see now that a crown cannot give happiness. True happiness comes from connection, from shared life, from love. Daniel took her hand in his, a simple gesture that spoke more than words. Then perhaps you have found it here. Alira looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she let herself truly smile. The bond that had begun as punishment had transformed into trust, respect, and something deeper. She had chosen this life, this man, and found that the simple moments could be richer than all the grandeur of her empire. The Council of the Zalari did not return immediately, giving the humans and Alira time to strengthen their bonds. They spent the days in quiet companionship. Alira helped with the farm work. Daniel showed her the techniques of planting, building, and caring for animals. In the evenings, they shared meals by the fire, telling stories of past adventures, of victories and mistakes, laughter mingling with the warmth of the flames. Alira learned to enjoy the rhythm of life on Earth. She no longer saw her marriage as a punishment, but as a chance to experience something she had never been taught: equality, trust, and genuine love. She marveled at the strength of human hearts, at their ability to work, to fight, and to forgive. One afternoon, Daniel suggested a walk into the nearby hills. Alira followed, curious about the natural beauty beyond the farm. The hills were green and rolling, dotted with flowers and small streams. Birds sang in the trees, and the air was fresh and sweet. "This world is different from mine," Alira said. "It feels alive in ways I never knew." Daniel smiled. "It is, and it will stay alive if people care for it, protect it, and cherish it. Just like we care for each other." Alira felt a shiver of warmth. She squeezed his hand, not out of fear, pride, or obligation, but because she wanted to. She wanted to stand beside him, not as a princess forced into marriage, but as a partner who had chosen love. Days turned into weeks. The bond between Daniel and Alira grew stronger with every shared task, every conversation, and every challenge they faced together. They laughed, worked, and rested in harmony. Their presence became familiar and comforting to the villagers, who now saw the princess not as a distant figure, but as one of their own. Then, one quiet evening, a message arrived from the stars. The Zalari Council had decided to leave Earth alone, for now. Reports of Alira's defiance and the humans' courage had spread throughout the empire. The council recognized that a princess who chose loyalty and love over fear could not be forced, backed by threats alone. For the first time, Alira had the freedom to live as she wished. She stood with Daniel outside their farmhouse, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "We are free," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "Not just free from them, but free to live our life as we choose." Alira turned to him, her eyes shining. "I was forced to marry you, but I would choose you every time. Not for duty, not for punishment, but because you make life stronger, brighter, and full of joy." Daniel smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. "And I would choose you. You have shown me courage, wisdom, and heart beyond measure. You are more than a princess. You are my partner, my equal, my home." For the first time since her arrival on Earth, Alira felt completely at peace. The fear of the Empire, the weight of her past, and the uncertainty of punishment faded into the background. She was not alone. She was not powerless. She was loved, respected, and free to choose happiness. Together, they walked through the fields, side by side, hand in hand. The wind whispered through the grass, the stars twinkled above, and the world felt vast and alive. They laughed, spoke of dreams, and planned for the future. Alira no longer wore her pride as armor, but her courage as strength. Daniel no longer feared the impossible, for he had discovered that love could give a person power beyond any empire. Andi. That quiet farm beneath the endless sky, a human and a princess found a truth greater than any crown or throne. They found joy in simplicity, courage in loyalty, and happiness in each other. And so, the gorgeous alien princess, once forced to marry a human as punishment, discovered that the greatest gift was not wealth, power, or titles. The greatest gift was the choice to love and be loved, the freedom to live a life of heart and courage, and the happiness that comes when two souls stand together against the world. In the gentle glow of dawn, with the farm alive with life and the promise of a future unbound, Daniel and Alira smiled at one another, knowing that this was the beginning of everything beautiful.